All right, sorry about that. Okay, so today the specific standard I want to focus on is 7.6b. Analyze the development of plot through the internal and external responses of the characters.
Okay.
So not just looking at the plot, but then figuring out what does it tell us about why characters are doing what they're doing, and how are the actions and the thoughts of the characters, how is it affecting the story? Okay? So that's what we're going to talk about. So in order for students to do that, for them to analyze the way characters affect the story, what are some skills you think students need to have?
First, they have to understand the characteristics, character traits of the individuals. They have to understand where each character fits into the story. And that's something that we discussed. We analyzed different character traits of the different individuals in Outsiders and where each character, how they interacted.
Good.
So that was something that they had to understand in order to get the overall picture for how these characters come together to create this particular type of story.
Excellent. That kind of goes with what I was thinking. I was saying you need to comprehend the text first, how the plot develops, so like the 5 stages that you were talking about, and then knowing what internal responses are, because it talks about internal responses. So what does it mean for a character to have an internal response?
What they think of, like
Right.
one of the characters, Ponyboy, for instance, he was the youngest character in the book, and his whole thought process, which they constantly showed over and over again, was that he didn't feel he was good enough. You know, he always felt that he did things wrong and he never got it right. And so they had to understand that internal thought process that he had to see where he fit into the story.
And then take that internal thought process, he doesn't feel good enough, and figure out how does that affect the theme.
Exactly.
So at the end of the story, what does he learn from that feeling of not getting? Okay, good. And then the external response to the characters as well. So what do you think might be some gaps? So kids are doing an excellent job of figuring out like the plot, figuring out how setting impacts the plot. That was really a big strength. They know, okay, so it's set here, so that influences the story.
Right.
What do you think are the gaps that are hurting them in the areas of how characters' responses internally and externally affect the story? What do you think might be going on?
I think that in some instances, they're not recognizing a lot of the dialogue for the external responses and what's happening. I think that they're not gaining the connection between how that is affecting another character.
And you say the students that are getting it right, because there are
Right, there are those that are getting it right.
The kids that are getting it right, they're figuring that out.
They're figuring it out,
Okay.
yes.
So I would say that I think the data tells us that our strength is the comprehension, they're understanding it, and they're also figuring out how the setting matters, how all these parts of plot matter. Now we just got to take them to that next level.
Yes.
So, do you have any ideas for that, for 4B?
No, I haven't, since we moved on from this particular thing, we did work a lot with analyzing the character traits, and the explanation that we went through with that, some of them understood it, some of them, kinda got it, but they just weren't able to quite pull a strong grasp on it. So when it came down to, in terms of testing, it didn't translate. And so, going into trying to help them gain a better understanding of it, I guess just external motivations, and delving deeper into that.
And that can be tricky because part of, like with an English teacher, you move on from fiction and now you're reading expository.
Exactly.
And how do I scaffold this back in?
Back in.
And we can talk about some of that.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so we kind of talked about what unsuccessful students struggle to do, how to analyze a character's thoughts and actions, look at that dialogue that you're talking about, and connect it with the big picture. I think that's a big thing with English classes. What is the big picture of the story, and how do the characters relate to that?
Right.
Conceptual understanding. So what kind of misconceptions are students having? Students chose answers. So on the test, if we can look at number 7,
Okay.
what was the most commonly picked answer that was wrong on number 7?
The most commonly picked answer that was wrong was C or H.
Okay. Oh, so, all right, C. So on this, it says, why are the woman's comments about the nest in paragraph 6 through 10 important? So that's the kind of question we're talking about. So not just her comments, her dialogue, like you were talking about, but why is her dialogue important to the big picture of the story? So taking the dialogue and not just understanding what she's saying, but how does it connect to the big picture?
Right.
So C said they revealed the significance of seeing turtles hatch from their nest. The
Mhm.
correct answer.
No, C is
oh,
the
C is
correct
now,
answer.
and then
So what they chose,
a lot of kids chose. A and B.
A and B, and that
Okay.
was even. It was 25% for each.
And
So a
they're,
lot
they're
of kids
picking
chose
answers that are
A and B.
true,
Mhm.
but that don't connect with the big picture of the story.
Right,
So
and
we
that's
gotta,
what they're
yeah,
missing.
Right.
Mhm.
So that's the tricky thing is a lot of times on the STAR test, there will be multiple answers that are true.
Mhm.
Like they're all true about the character, but which one is the closest to the big picture?
Mhm.
And that's something that's a good thing that because I think that we can easily kind of
Yeah.
identify that. So let's plan to reteach. So what, I have some ideas on what we could focus on to improve the approach. So you
Okay.
used a plot chart,
Uh-huh.
used this assignment right here,
Mhm.
and students had to identify the parts of the plot as they went and had to find out the conflict and the setting. It's a good assignment. So I was thinking that what we could do is, if we want to, so they know about the dialogue, they know about the actions, but we want to get them to think about the big picture. So what if we kind of adjust this assignment to where part of their assignment was, you pick a few of these things and you have to explain how it connects to the theme or what the big picture is.
Okay.
So if we added a part of the assignment where students had to, after or as they're working on the plot chart, number one, why are the actions of the plot chart important?
Mhm.
So maybe either you pick it or you have the students pick. They have to have 4 actions on their rising action or their falling action
Okay.
and figure out, why is this important?
Mhm.
Why is it important that this character is doing this? And then number 2, how do characters' actions on a plot chart impact the theme? So they have, is theme part of the assignment? Yes,
Mhm.
so that's what I thought, yeah. So you had them figure out what the theme of the story was.
Mhm.
So maybe having them have to use numbers from their plot chart, which numbers have to
into the
fit into
theme.
that theme.
Okay.
And that way they can figure out, so for instance, in this one, if the theme of the story, the student says, love is a good thing, but we need to love each other.
Mhm.
So what evidence could they use to back that up?
Right.
So like what actions in the story led us to think that love is a good thing? Is it the love between Johnny and Ponyboy? Is it the love of the family?
Mhm.
Is it how the outsiders, the group, the greasers, do they replace the family?
Mhm.
And
Right.
and that way, when kids are doing this, they see the connection. They see that this isn't separate from this. These are leading to this. So what, do you have any thoughts on that?
Mhm. No, that does sound like something that would really help them tie it all in together, because they can take something as simple as saying, okay, the theme is love, and they saw that in so many components of the story.
Mhm.
So them being able to take one central theme and tie it back into all the different components that they recognized it in the story, I think would give them the opportunity to understand that all of this falls in together.
Would you think that that would be something that we would need to work together to make, like adjust the assignment on paper? Or is it something that we could maybe have them do in their notebooks as they're working on this? How would you think that we could do that?
I would probably have them write it in their notebooks. You know, I found that when they are able to go through their thought process and write things out,
Mhm.
they're better able to comprehend and understand, because it's their own thoughts and not me just saying, okay,
Answer this question.
answer this right. So I think that that would be a better way for them to understand.
And when they're doing that, what would you want them to try to articulate? What kind of thoughts would you want them to get across?
I would want them to basically give back to me how the different groups are relating, you know, and give back to me how all of this ties into the theme of these are relationships are
Mhm.
in the book. So I would want all of that to tie back into how these relationships can affect the outcome of the story, the plot of the story, and the individuals in the story itself.
Good. And then through that, we're getting students to articulate not just the parts of the plot, but why do the parts of the plot matter and how do they
Right,
connect?
and how they all connect, yes.
Good. So, what are some ways that we could, because I know right now you're in expository,
Mhm.
and then we've got persuasion coming up the next.
Mhm.
So how can we reinforce plot? Is there a way that we could kind of embed it in a lesson? Is there a way that we
back
could
in.
maybe find something that connects to some expository or persuasive text
Mhm.
that connects maybe?
Yeah, I think that, that would be something that I would probably have to explore,
Mhm.
and find a way to work that back in. And, that's the thing about coming into this
Right.
first year.
All right.
I'm-
Well, and actually, I was thinking about, there's another, in unit 4B, it talks about making connections across text.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So, of different genres.
Uh-huh.
So when we make connections.
So then we could pull this back
we
in.
can pull this back in.
Right.
And then we can kind of work through students. So yeah, that'd be good. So what do you think how would you know if this was working? How would you know if this is improving kids' ability?
I think, I think through their writing,
Mhm.
and once they're prompted on something, being able to tie those things back in. And I think you would be able to see, not only through that, of course, we would have to go through some question and answers to see if they're able to understand how everything is relating. And then also having them do some writing.
Okay. Good. What would you, and then when you're saying doing some writing, you mean creating something of their own, or
Mhm.
writing response?
I think creating something of their own.
Okay. And then maybe showing that they can create writing fiction? Like showing that they can do this as, like they can create.
They can create their own.
Dialogue that
right,
impacts a
dialogue
theme.
that impacts a theme, yeah.
Because I guess that would be the highest level
Of comprehension.
right, would be
yeah.
that I can do it myself, not just see how it all
Right.
works out. Well, good.
And you would have to build upon that in order for them to get to that point in terms of writing.
Okay.
You know.
So, I guess we could work together. I mean, we don't PLC together, but we could maybe
Right.
work together to create something like that. Maybe work on some STEM questions in the notebook so that when we get to Unit 4, we can do that.
Oh, that would
All right.
be great. Yeah.
Excellent.
That would be great.
So it looks like we've been tackling 7.6B. So this will show up again, and we have the benchmark coming up next
Yes,
week.
next
And they'll be taken with the reading and the writing.
Yes.
So when we look at the reading, we can see maybe have things changed a bit.
See if there's some
And
type,
if
right.
they're increasing, then maybe we can modify it. And if it's the same, then we'll definitely
We'll
want to
definitely know
implement
what to
this
do. Yeah.
sooner. Well, thank you so much.
You're so
I appreciate it. I hope this
welcome.
helps.
I hope so too. Thank you.